So before lunch break, we have only one presentation. It's by John Greaney from Ireland, University of Dublin. And you will have one reviewer, Professor Gintautas Mažeikis, which means that you may use more time for your presentation, something like 25 minutes.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so
thank you very much, Thomas, for inviting me to the school. It's great to be here. I was just talking to my reviewer, Gintus, downstairs beforehand, and he remarked while reading the paper how he imagined it was going to be very difficult for me to present it to you, given the conceptual framework and the complexity of some of the concepts. So, if you find it obtuse, I do not apologize in advance. So I will begin just by outlining a project of my PhD. So my research will perform a study of memory and silence in post-independence Irish literature. And I'm reading the novelistic fiction of John McGahern, Kate O'Brien, Flann O'Brien, and Samuel Beckett. And in doing so, I am considering that there is a move towards silence in this literature. So the literature in Ireland prior to independence, some of you might know the writers, there's the likes of Joyce and Yeats. So it was an audacious, ambitious, and very intrepid literature that was in some ways co-aligned with the movement towards independence, or less anomic in its gesture. So very much considering political movement as its project. So the aim of my research then is to address and outline the turn towards silence, which is evident in the fiction which followed independence. So you have an overt literature beforehand and a very enclosed literature after. So just by silence, I'm referring to a dual understanding of concepts. So on the one hand, a psychoanalytic conception of literature as a testimony that conceals as much as it reveals, therefore silence as latent within text. And then on the other hand, following Foucault, silence, the things one declines to say or is forbidden to name, the discretion that is required between different speakers, as less the absolute limit of discourse, the other side from which it is separated by a strict boundary and an element that functions alongside the things said with them and in relation to them within overall strategies. So there is not one but many silences, and they are an integral part of the strategies that underlie and permeate discourses. So the link to memory, I hope, should be coming into sight at this stage. So an understanding of silence in this manner is the complete opposite to concepts of oblivion or absolute forgetting. Viewing silence as such, both potentially latent in memory and that which is potentially active and strategic in memory. So my task, in turn, is to shed light on the politics of these concealed, latent, or active and strategic processes of memory in these literatures. So, in doing so, I have come across the problem of methodology, which everybody has, and how to read these processes of memory in literature, these processes of silence. And memory studies in general has kind of lent itself the concept of memory as the foundation of literature. So it grants itself its own criteriology to discern memory in literature without a major investigation as to how literature becomes manifest in itself, or how it is created. So that's one of the things I've had to look into in depth. So I'm largely taking a post-structural approach to reading silence and memory in the text, or literary texts. Because to my eyes it is a post-structural approach which will render memory and silence most alive and politically potent when performed upon the literary text. So let me explain that. First of all, there is a tendency in literary criticism in general to reduce literature to the autobiographical or the individual case, so that of the writer, the author. And the historical period which my research deals with, 1930 to 1970 in Ireland, was renowned for its state control of literary production. Censorship was rife in Ireland at the time, so the opposite to an open culture, every literary enunciation was shut down because of the subversive potential which literature yielded prior to independence and how it lent its objectives and aims to the independence movement. So, yeah, there's a tendency in Ireland and criticism in general, Irish literary criticism, global criticism, to make literature the concern of the individual. So, looking at how memory studies conceives literature, Astrid Earle writes that literature is informed by memory. So a couple of quotes here is, "It is not enough to pick up isolated data of our past experience. We must recollect them, we must organize them, and we must synthesize them and assemble them into